All right, hey guys, welcome. This is normally our Tuesday night Bible study, and I'm doing something different here in that I want to talk election, what the elections are. So I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna talk elections. And two things I want to talk about. Why is the black vote important to the electoral college? And did God tell us to vote Republican? Now, of course, in order to why I am saying this, over the election course of the election season, um, those are two good points, and I want to talk about them because they are, again, they're just it's important. Now, um, so it's right now about 45 minutes from the polls closing on the um, polling on the West Coast, and right now all of the media, they're itching to start saying this, they're itching to start making their pronouncements. And we'll see if they, I mean, we'll see how, you know, at this point, you're going to see if what prophecies come true, right? There are those um, who have prophesied that the Trump will win. I haven't heard any prophecies whether or not if the president is not going to win. I haven't heard those. Because usually the people that's making the prophecies are coming from the Republican side or the evangelical side, and that's why I'm going to get into talking about, did God tell us to vote? Did God tell us to vote Republican? Famed pastor John MacArthur said that no true Christian can vote Democrat. And again, these are thoughts. I want to get into that. Okay. I also want to get into the notion of kind of talking about why the importance of the black vote. Because what's amazing about this, talking about the importance of the black vote. What is amazing about this is that the black vote is important since the Republicans are spending so much effort to suppress the vote. They're doing so much time, they are spending so much plots, schemes to try to suppress the vote. In fact, the Republicans are trying to suppress the vote on all levels. We saw where the caravan of Trump supporters were blocking a Biden bus from traveling. And make no mistake about it, a lot of police departments are on standby, and that's not because of the Democrat, but coming Trump supporters. Trump supporters are threatening violence if Trump loses, or if the election doesn't go their way. But let's talk about this, because I want to get into this. I want to show you something. Again, since we're 45 minutes, well, counting down now, more 40 minutes. And by the way, a few years ago, there was I forgot who it was, that called the election before the polls closed. And when they called it, people kind of just didn't vote. So now they have this standing rule that before, they're going to at least wait until the polls close, which would be West Coast time. It is now 8:21 Central Standard Time. Our polls here in Central Time Zone closed an hour and 22 minutes ago. On the East Coast, they've actually been closed now for 2 hours, but they have to wait for the West Coast. It's just the way the world spins around. You have to wait to, Now, kind of interesting. Here's an interesting thought. This is a sidebar. The time zones, you kind of wonder if they had only one time zone. Well, I'm confusing something with daylight saving times. I'm confusing daylight saving times, which we really don't need, as opposed to the orbit of the Earth. Okay. All right. So anyway, that was a ill thing. But let's talk why is the black vote so important to the Electoral College? And in your note, I said Electoral College. The black vote, black people make up 13% of the population, which means then the eligible voters were even less when you compare. Okay, but let's just say 13%. Let's say if you apply the same 13% to the eligible voters of America, 13%. Let's use that. So why is such a small percentage so important? Important enough, as I said, for Republicans to repeatedly and constantly try to suppress the vote, stop the vote in some cases. Well, let me show you. This is a map, Electoral College map. Now, when you look at this map, it gives you the electoral votes by breakdown, by the number, or what's called the electoral votes that count. Now, in order to understand this, let's first kind of go back and understand what the Electoral College is. I'm going to come back to this map, but what the Electoral College is. The Electoral College was developed in 1787, drafted into the Constitution. Now, what you have to understand then is that the Electoral College is a constitutional institution. So when people want to, they talk about getting rid of the Electoral College, that is going to be something that is very hard to do, because it's going to apply, it's going to take, again, people voting on it, senators and all that. And let me just say this right now, the Republicans have absolutely no incentive of getting rid of the Electoral College. If you get rid of the Electoral College, pretty much the Republicans never win another election. And I'm going to show you why. But, of course, so the difference when we're talking about the Electoral College versus the popular vote. The popular vote is the everyday citizen, eligible voters voting. Okay. I forgot what you have with that. You have some over 100 million, 120 million, 130, 40 million people, something like that. Popular voting. So they cast the vote. The actual people who elect the president, that is the Electoral College, which they meet in December. And what they are, I'm going to bring this up here. They, I want to come back because the Electoral College, let's see if I can get a brief explanation. It is basically 538 members, which means any president, so like Trump or Biden tonight, has to get 270 to win. There is a rare occasion that there might be a tie. If both gets 200, I believe it's 269. But there are 538 members, and they make up congressmen. The number of it, they make up the number of Congress, and then and then the senators, and then of course the District of Columbia, and that's where you get to your 538 members. Okay, they are selected by particularly the Republican parties of the state. Okay, now one of the things about the Electoral College, and again I'm going to show you why. Again, the black people are not why this is so important. Okay, so understand the Electoral College itself is 538 members. They elect the president. Now, so what they are supposed to do is to represent the popular vote. They don't. I'm going to give you two things that need to change about them, rather than that would be even better than abolishing. In other words, the amount, it's going to be a very hard task to try to say we're going to do without the Electoral College. And really, if you stop and if you understand the Electoral College, you don't have to get rid of it. There are actually two things that need to change, and I'll get to those in a moment. Okay. So let's go back. You have 538 members, which represent the number of the one for each member of the House of Representatives and for the senators, and then I think you have three. Each state, by the way, has a minimum of three electors, as they're called. Now, there are two things that I said that need to happen before that should change. Let me go back to my map because I think you need to understand. So right here, what you have, if you look at the red states, of course, represent Republicans. The blue states represent Democrats. So when you see all these numbers, how these numbers are broken down, the number of electors per state with a minimum of 3. Each state has a minimum of 3 electors. However, according to population, that's how many each state is granted. Now, one of the ideals was they didn't want a state, for example, you look at Montana, which hardly has any people in it, Idaho, Wyoming, these states here that hardly have any people, didn't have a fighting chance, of course, for to be represented. Okay, but that's not the biggest issue with to me anyway, with the Electoral College. Go back to my map. You look at the number. So, for example, look at California. California has 55 electors. Why? Because of the population. It is the most populated state. You look at Florida, and of course now Florida has been in the news with 29 electoral votes. So why is Florida so important? What they call swing states, and even though they're red, Florida is a swing state. By the way, you don't know how this state is going to turn out to vote, even though it's typically a Republican state. Other swing states, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, those states are states that you see heavy campaigning in. Now, why is that? Because those states will bring a person across the finish line. Okay? So that's important to understand. Those numbers, those states, they pull people across the finish line. Hillary didn't go to Wisconsin, barely went to Michigan, and she lost those 2 states. That's why Trump won. Now, if you want to understand how Trump can lose the popular vote by 3 million, okay, now, and then still win, now remember, it's because of this electoral outlay, the numbers of the electoral. So, the Electoral College, again, they are the people who elect the president. And what you have to understand, why your vote is important, but I'm also going to drop a bomb and say why it is not important. Well, I'm going to say where it doesn't count at. And then I'm going to tell you what those are the two areas where what needs to change. In recent time, we've had 2 examples where candidates have lost the popular vote but won the electoral vote and became president. Trump was one and Bush Jr. was the other in 2000. And that's why shame on the Democrats, because they had 16 years to try to correct the issue of the Electoral College. Okay. In 2000, Bush, even though Gore had won more of the popular vote, Bush had won, okay, Bush had won more Electoral College, and of course that is a highly, to this day, controversial election, because it all came down to Florida. Now, here are the 2 issues that I have with the Electoral College, which need to change. One, the Electoral College, remember those 538 electors, have the power to vote however they want. And although they are supposed to represent the popular vote, they don't have to. And that's important. They don't have to even represent the popular vote based upon their own state. So let's say, for example, if hypothetically, if every one of the electoral candidates win all 50 states, the Electoral College can still vote for whoever they want. It hasn't been tested yet. Hasn't been tested, but they have that power. To me, that needs to change. That's too much power. In other words, it should be that they represent the will of the people. Now, the other issue, and this is the one that we see that happened twice, right, within a 20-year period of time. A lot of the states have 48 of the states have what's called winner takes all. Okay, which is again why the swing states such as Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, right, Ohio, and Florida, right? What happens when you have a person who has, let's say he has the majority of the vote. So let's say he has 51% of the vote in one state. Let's use California, for example. So you see right there, 55 electoral votes. A lot of votes right there, right? But let's just say a candidate has 51% of the vote. Because of the winner takes all, then that person gets all 55 electoral votes. And that's a problem. Because what that is saying is that the 49% of the votes don't matter. Right? They don't matter. This is what happened with Trump. See? Trump barely beat out Hillary in Wisconsin, in Michigan, believe Ohio. And guess what? He took all, look at Ohio has 18, Michigan has 16, Wisconsin has 10. So he was able to take all. And even though Hillary have received more popular vote, Now think about this. She received more popular vote by 3 million because Trump won in states where he needed to win to get those electoral college votes. That's why he won. And that's why it's, that needs to change, because had just on a fairness, if you divide the electoral college according to, just like it, according to the popular vote, Trump wouldn't have won. By the way, the Republicans know that. That's why, again, it'll be a hard fought to even get that amendment changed, because they know if just on that basis, right? Again, they'll never win. Tonight's election, tonight's election will it's going to be a tight race, and this, you're going to see this in play more. Winner takes all. All you need is, if you got 51%, you take all. That needs to change. Now, why is the black vote more important? Okay, blacks have voted Democrats. Why? Because frankly, the Republicans have rolled out the welcome wagon, and even though Trump has done better at reaching out, still hadn't worked, right? Still hadn't worked. But why are blacks so important to the electoral college? Now, remember we said now, the person who wins the electoral the majority votes, he gets a winner takes all, right? So where do blacks live? And this is why it's important. They don't live in Wyoming, right? No, don't live in Idaho. But look at some of the cities they live in. California, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, New York. New York probably has, I think, the largest concentration of blacks. So that's 29 electoral votes to, right? Typically to a Democrat. Pennsylvania, right? Philadelphia, right? Florida. This is why the black vote is so important, where they're concentrating. Atlanta, right? Now, even though Atlanta is a red state, but Georgia, the red state, Atlanta, what? Majority black. Memphis, Indianapolis, Detroit. All these cities, states where blacks are concentrated. Here's the deal. They are enough to bring a candidate across the line. That's why the black vote is so important. That's why you see sometimes, every now and then, I think you had Ice Cube that came up and said, we're going to, he wanted to consolidate, he wanted to have a contract with Black America. And not that was a new concept, that has been done before, at least twice, by national figures. Back during the Obama administration, a guy named Travis Smiley, people might remember him. Cornel West, they tried to have a contract with Black America. Basically the same concept. They said, hey, here are our ideas, here are our needs. And they wanted to farm them out to whoever would listen, whatever party would listen. The problem that they ran into, people said, who are you? Right? They said, who are you? Right? People, little known is, you go back into the 80s, Ralph Abernathy, who was Martin Luther King's right-hand man, but in the 80s became disillusioned, and also became a Republican. He went to Reagan at the time and said, I'll try to work and get the black vote on your side. Reagan basically said, we don't need it. I don't need the black vote. And it was true. He didn't need it. He had 80% of the white vote. And the thing about what's probably wrong with the Republicans now is they haven't realized that, imagine this is Reagan, who has 80% of the white vote, right? Hands down, he had 80%, this much. Now, Trump has about 85% of the white vote. But except it's like this now. And that is the problem with the Republican Party. Their numbers, they really don't have enough to get them across. Even if Trump had 100%, they don't have enough. So that's why they work on voter suppression. Okay? So again, the reason why the black vote is so important is because where black people live at, where they're concentrated. They're concentrated in cities, and look at some of these cities where blacks are concentrated at. You can say in California, of course, Vegas, Minnesota, right? St. Paul, the bigger cities, you see where blacks are concentrated. That's why their vote is so important. That's why their vote is so important. If the Republicans were smart, they would try to do something about gaining more black vote. If they were smart. If they were smart, they would do that. Remember back a few years they called an autopsy. And the autopsy was basically for that reason. The autopsy was, hey, let's try to say, hey, we're sorry, we're going to reform. They didn't. And even though Trump sometimes put on a good show, he really didn't reach out either. And we're going to see just how that affects. We're going to see, because Trump has a lot of other troubles, we'll see. Even though he has great support, his base is he has stirred the Republican base, I think, probably more than anyone over the last 20 years, since Reagan. Not even Bush Jr. really enjoyed, in my opinion, Trump's success. Reagan did. Reagan had unprecedented Republican success. He had the white evangelical, he had the white conservatives, white people, just period. But today, Trump is struggling. His antics have gotten probably more in trouble. And again, we're going to see, as you're going to see now, I'm trying to think as 15 more minutes when the polls close, you're going to kind of start seeing how people are going to start calling the elections and stuff like that. They're probably also doing counts as we speak. We'll see. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about then, the Christian vote, because the Christian vote, and you haven't really seen the Christian vote energized like it is today since Reagan. And it baffles me why the Christian vote, why they have really gone so hard for Trump. And I'm saying Trump, by the way, I just I want to read something, and this is a post from Facebook to me, the Dear Christian Church. But I'm just going to read. I'm not going to reveal her name. So, and she posted this today. She said, so appropriate for today. God appoints the positions in government. We must vote righteous people into those positions. Vote God's agenda. Pro-life, pro-biblical marriage between a man and a woman, pro-Israel, freedom of religion, and speech. And I think that kind of sums it up in terms of what the Christian right vote is about. I think that really sums it up, where you have people who, Christians, and I'm going to say white evangelical Christians, but not only white evangelical Christians. One of the problems with the evangelical Christians, and I'm going to say the white evangelical Christians, the racist past that the church has never healed from. Some have made what they call reconciliation efforts, but what has happened is Trump seemed to have energized that white evangelical, white, and he speaks to that. Just think about this, right? The other day when he talked about suburban women, he made the suburban women safe, the suburban neighborhoods safe. Now just think about that statement. Now, that doesn't reflect all of the, I'm going to say, evangelical churches. But they have come out and they have thrown their support behind Trump. And I'm going to say what's behind a lot, even this, what I just read right here. Notice he said, vote God's agenda. This is reflective. I think this post right here sums it up. This is what they really think. They said, vote, God appoints the positions in government. We must vote righteous people into these positions. So the question that I would have is, how does Trump is not righteous? All right, but some people would say it is the positions, okay? And all right, my feeds have been, my feeds are freezing up. I'm not going to mention certain names. That's what's going on, I think, too. Whenever I mention certain names, that's when they freeze up. So I got to kind of pick up on the code, because one of the reasons why, especially on Facebook, one of the reasons why you will see freeze ups. Facebook is flagging. Facebook is flagging. But okay. So, but anyway, he says God appoints the positions in government. We must vote righteous people in. And I'm going to say, how then is the current occupant of the White House? How are they righteous? Then he said, vote God's agenda, right? Vote God's agenda. And what's amazing about this, when they say God's agenda, by the way, and this, by the way, this is how they think that this is God's agenda. They really think that God is sitting up on, that they really thought, if you really stop and you think about it, they really, they really think that their opinion is, their position is God's agenda. That God is sitting up on the throne saying, "Oh, this is it, y'all." So again, okay. Well, God. So when they say God's agenda, what's amazing about this is this only God's agenda? I mean, think about this. In other words, if they achieve these 5 talking points, God's agenda, right? 4, I'm sorry, pro-life, a pro-biblical marriage between a man and a woman, pro-Israel, and freedom of speech and religion. Which, okay, that, and they're saying that's God's agenda, by the way. And really, let me just tell you, it's misrepresenting God's agenda. Let's look at each one of them. First and foremost, he says pro-life, which means, of course, anti-abortion. Right. Okay. What party? Because even when Trump, I said it, I mean to say it, let's see if it frees up now. Anyway, the first 2 years of his administration, when he had control of both houses. Okay, now think about this. when he had control of both houses, why didn't he eradicate? Why didn't he put forth bills, laws, anything? Why didn't he put forth that? If he's such the champion, okay, I mean, if he's such the champion of pro-life, and for that matter, any Republican, wouldn't you have thought that they would have said, we have control of the House, we have control of the Senate, we have a leader that is on our side, God sent, right? God sent. Why didn't they do it in the first 2 years when they could have done it? What did they do? Anything in the first 2 years? Okay. When they say a pro-biblical marriage between a man and a woman, that's not going to happen. Tell me what Republican is going to vote any kind of measure for that? Now, the pro-Israel is very interesting to me. The pro-Israel, meaning they raved, of course, when he moved the embassy. They looked at that as a major victory, right? And I ask people all the time, what is the biblical significance of the embassy moving to Israel? What is the biblical relevancy of that? First and foremost, Israel as a nation. Now, if you're saying that we have to vote righteous people in, is that what you're saying? Now watch it. If you're saying we have to vote righteous people in, okay, so you're saying, so these talking points are talking points in which, right? This is your guide. Pro-Israel, freedom of religion, speech, pro-marriage, man and a woman, pro-life. Okay. Israel is more liberal in every one of those talking points than America is. Israel is more. So by supporting that nation, aren't we then supporting the very talking points that you're saying that we should vote against here in America? Okay. So again, these issues are very kind of funny that they make up yeah, I'm just thinking, okay, I'm going to ask a question. I think one of the reasons why I'm getting interrupted is because I'm mentioning certain names, and I'm trying to remind myself not to mention certain names. But as far as the question, are Christians and evangelicals the same? Yes and no. Evangelical is a branch of, we can say, Christian right, or they are, they're not a denomination because they evangelicals cross over denominational lines, but evangelicals would say, by definition, they are more adherent to biblical interpretation, thus more pious. If I was to say, when you look at Israel's rulers during the time of Jesus, and you look at the Sadducees, where evangelicals would have been the Pharisees because they're more pious. Okay, so like evangelicals, again, they're going to be the ones who are. A Christian is the person. The Christian, of course, is a very broad term, and neither term were designations given by God. Christians, of course, started with mockery. It was it was a term. We would say something like, today, you're a Jesus freak, a Bible thumper. And the Christians, and as their habit was, whenever you would insult them, they would usually say, fine. If you're calling me a Jesus freak, that's a compliment. If you say I'm a Christ follower, that's a compliment. In fact, Peter, even in his epistle, said, if you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed for that reason. So then over time, like centuries, this sort of evolved into what a follower of Christ is. And of course, Christianity became sort of the de facto name of our faith. Okay, it is certainly the name of our religion, the name of our faith. And so I want to read something from, and this is a lot of evangelical Christians would read this. This is in Romans chapter 13. This is a verse that they would use, and it says, and this is verse 1, says, everyone must submit to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist are instituted by God. So then, the one who resists the authority is opposing God's command, and those who oppose it will bring judgment on themselves. For the rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have its approval. For the government is not God's servant for your good, but if you do wrong, be afraid, because it does not carry the sword for no reason. For government is God's servant and avenger that brings wrath on the one who is doing wrong. Therefore you must submit, not only because of wrath, but also because of your conscience. Let's see. When your conscience. Okay, verse 6. He says, for this reason, pay taxes, since the authorities are God's public servants, continuing attending to these talks. Pay your obligations to everyone, taxes to those who you owe taxes, tolls to those you owe tolls, respect to those you owe respect, and honor to those you have honor. Now this is, of course, Romans 13 is one of their basic scriptures. Here's what I'm going to say. They wasn't quoting this too much during the Obama years, okay? And now they are promoting this. They're promoting this now because of Trump, because they feel Trump is God's agenda. And thus they are actually saying, in some cases, that if you are rejecting this, if you're not on Trump's train, then you are resisting God. In fact, they even say that there are some people who even say that Trump is a fulfillment of prophecy, like King Cyrus. I heard one tape where the guy said he compared him to the kings of some of the old kings of Israel, like Jehu. They didn't mention Ahab. But that smacks of desperate when I see preachers do that. And here's my point. First and foremost, even if you want to use an Old Testament figure like Cyrus, even if you want to use Jehu, and they know that these kings later became wicked. Jehu was a very wicked king. Yes, God raised him up. But understand, God's using someone. Like God used a false prophet, Balaam. And he used Balaam to utter a prophecy, and that was it. So if you want to use that, first and foremost, God is the one who used them. God said he was the one that has used them. So where is your measurement to say that Trump is being raised up by God? And for that matter, if you're going to say that Trump being raised up by God, it's going to be that goes for any president. And like I say, they certainly wasn't saying that during Obama's years. In fact, they Even now, they'll say that Obama was the worst president ever in history. The criminal, he's this, he's that, all that kind of stuff. Here's my thing. And I often say this to people, I don't criticize a person who supports Trump or supports the Republican. That's your right. I do criticize people defending Trump. During the Clinton years, the Christian right leaders most definitely said that character and moral behavior was essential in choosing a president. Now with Trump, because of what they say is God's agenda, the behavior and all that's not important. And that's just, again, that is, it's hypocritical is what it is. Okay, it's hypocritical. Should Christians vote? Here's my thing. It is neither here or there if Christians vote. As far as the kingdom of God is concerned, it has nothing to do with it. If America was to fall and all of a sudden we became an atheistic nation, in other words, we were conquered and we became an atheistic nation, well, guess what? The gospel is still going to go on. True Christians are going to preach the gospel, witness their faith, even to the point of death, being jailed, right, being persecuted. So in that respect, no, it doesn't matter. If you say, and people are saying that, saying this, Pastor John MacArthur made this statement. He says that no true Christian, okay, in fact, he was recounting a conversation that he had. He had been defying the lockdown orders in California. And so California, they're going back and forth. He's battling with California. And I believe they're going to start fining him per day or whatever, per service or something like that. He has been one of these people that you would see at a Trump rally. Not a Trump rally because he's a very, very extreme conservative. But when it comes to this kind of brand of politics, though, again, there's a compromise. And what's amazing is that they, just said, well, no mask, no social distancing. He wasn't even doing that. They just said, we're gonna meet. His congregation, his auditorium seats something like 3,000. He packed it out. No mask, no social distancing. Well, of course, corporates begin to hit. Not much, only like 3 cases so far that we know of. And they were staff members, but we'll see. But, so Trump calls John MacArthur and says, hey, congratulations, that's way to go, stand against the tyrants, all that kind of stuff. And then, according to John MacArthur, he then tells Trump, oh, don't worry, President Trump, no true Christian can vote Democratic. No true Christian can vote that way. So now he's reduced our faith to a Republican Party, to a Republican agenda, and that's misrepresenting the gospel. That's misrepresenting, misrepresenting the Word of God. And that's a problem. So whether you vote Democrat, because again, as I said, both parties support the same thing. One is just in different degrees. Trust and believe that many Republicans are not going to vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. They want to take their mistress to get abortions when they need them too, or their daughters. But to say that, God now has concentrated his effort on those, again, 5 talking points, it's misrepresenting God. And then to say on top of that, well, God doesn't care about Trump's behavior, he doesn't. I said it again, and that's why again my freezing up here. I don't mean to mention his name because that's why I'm freezing up. Okay, but anyway, but to say that his behavior, okay, is we're going to ignore it because hey, he's pushing our agenda. It's just wrong, and especially when you think about what is it that you think he's pushing. As I said before, the fact that he moved the embassy to Israel has absolutely no has nothing. It means absolutely nothing, other than your base applauds you, but it doesn't mean anything in the Middle East. It doesn't mean anything prophetically. Absolutely nothing. Israel is cut off from God right now. They're not in covenant with God right now. Again, so it means absolutely nothing. But that's it. In the first 2 years, if he was such a champion, if he was such a Cyrus and all that, he squandered the first 2 years. So anyway, those are some of the things. I'm going to tell you that those are some of the, with this election cycle. And it's going to be interesting because as of now, the polls have closed on the West Coast. So now you're going to start seeing on the news coverage, and I'm getting ready to stop to get into it, but not much. I'll probably wait. I'm not going to really watch it, but because the news is going to come out sooner or later. But right as of now, the last of the polls are going to close. There's some polls, I think, even around Cook County here that's going to be open only because they had late starts. Those votes in and of themselves won't sway because Chicago is pretty much Democrat anyway. But even if it was, those few places not going to sway. So the pundits are going to now get to work. Who's winning, who's not going to winning, projections and all that kind of stuff. Pretty much, I'm going to say by morning we may know. We'll see. But anyway, that's all I have. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see how come. We may know in a couple of hours or by morning. We'll see what if there's going to be a new president or riots going to break out. All right, guys. Again, this is a kind of we'll be back to Tuesday night Bible study next Tuesday. I just wanted to talk about this election thing. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll see you next Tuesday.